I have finally filmed a video, and you better buckle up because it's going to be a long one. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Pete, and this is The Ponderings of Pete. If you haven't seen me in a while, hello, I'm here, I'm alive. If you have come here for the first time, hello. Thank you for stumbling upon my channel when YouTube is recommending to you all of the year-end videos, because that's what it's up. Thank you, algorithm. And for everybody else who might not fall into the either of those two categories, welcome. Hello. As I said in the intro, this is going to be a long video, likely to be a long video. I have like 10 pages in my notes here, and that's not even everything I'm going to say probably, because why would I stick to my notes? A little bit of background. Last time I did a wrap-up was in April. So it's time to talk to you guys about what I've been reading since then. I know some of you know some things, some of you know other things, but nobody knows the whole picture. So I'm here to fill you in on that. Let's get started. First of all, some stats. In 2023, I read 67 books and at least 3 novellas / short stories. I say 3 because I don't quite remember which short stories I read in the bind-up of academic exercises. I read some of them this year. And then during Short Story September, which was a thing, I read exactly 1 book of short stories and started at least 2 others, which I'm not going to talk about because I don't really remember which short stories I read from there. Yeah, so I didn't really do well in Short Stories September, which was really funny. I'm excited. This is about the number I hit every year, from anywhere from 50 to 70. At least I have for the past 2 years before this, if I remember correctly. And it was kind of like all over the place. There were some months that I read 3 books. There were some months that I read 9 randomly somehow. I don't know how I got there. So I'm definitely not consistent with how much I read, but I still read, and it's great. And I love that BookTube has gotten to me this place where I read this much, because I don't even know if I was hitting these numbers when I was a kid, and well, probably when I was doing like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew I was. But so let's start off and talk about what I was reading. Not in the beginning, because I already gave you wrap-ups for those, and you can go check those videos out, because I don't want to make this any longer than it has to be. More like I don't want to repeat myself. The video, I'll link a playlist down below that's like TBRs and wrap-ups, that if you sort from newest to oldest, you'll find the ones I'm talking about. So we're going to start in May, and I read a lot of series, so I'm not really going to tell you what month I read all of these in. I'm just going to tell you what I read. So, starting out with The Forge of Darkness by Steven Erikson, the man himself. This is book 1 in the Carcanus trilogy. This trilogy being unfinished as of yet, because he is still in the middle of writing A Walk in Shadow. I believe that's what he's writing right now. He could be writing the second book in the Witness trilogy. I have no idea. I'm not the man's babysitter. But I started this because I heard it was really good writing, and I like Malazan, so I was like, why not start this now that I'm done with the Ascendancy trilogy and I don't really want to start my reread yet of the rest of everything. I think that was the logic. So Carcanus, what is it? Depressing, in a word. This is a significant step from his writing in Malazan Book of the Fallen. There are bits and pieces, right? So to give you an idea, if you've read Toll the Hounds, right, take all the Tisty Andy parts and dial them up a little bit. That's this series. Because it's about the Tisty Andy, it's about the Tisty Leosin, it's about the Tisty, all those Tisty people. They're definitely not depressy. No, actually, they're all depressy. That was a stupid joke, but it's fine. So first of all, I would like to call this illuminating, because one of the interesting things about this is some of the names and some of the relationships between people is slightly tweaked from what we got in Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I think it's really easy to put this off, not towards Erikson just misremembering things. No. These are like fundamental things that are changed. These are things that he purposely changed because history has blended everything together, right? or there's the other things that make them into the other things that they were, that eventually it flows through history. It kind of feels like it just feels different from what we've heard, right? In very subtle ways, which to me makes sense because of the depth of Erikson's writing, or the depth of Erikson's world. And how he is very thoughtful about how history changes things, which has been something that he has talked about in Malazan Book of the Fallen before. Other things, I really like the politics in this book, right? So there were like subtle religious, not very subtle, but there were religious and political themes and stuff like that, and machinations, all that stuff going on. That was great. Also, whop on a thick layer of depression, because everybody's depressed. And they're not even the Tisty Andy yet. They're just the Tisty. They haven't even split yet. Yeah, I did like this in its own way. It was hard to get into. This took me about 4 months to get through different bits and pieces of it. Or, no, 5 months. I don't know. I tried to start it in January. And then after Forge of Darkness, I tried to start Fall of Light multiple times. I think I got a few pages in. But I never managed to finish it last year. I'm going to try to finish it this year, but no promises. I might just start off next year, aka 2025, with Fall of Light, and then go into my Malazan reread, because I have pushed that back to 2025 because of the Black Company. So I'm reading the Black Company this year, just FYI, and it's great. Risen Kingdom series, aka the Alchemy of Mask and Mirrors, is the first one. Labyrinth of Scions and Sorcery is the second one, and Uncharted Sky is the third one. These were really interesting. Wasn't planning on reading these. Alan had a read along. I was like, that sounds interesting. Let's go. So yeah, Library of Alexandria Discord, there's read-alongs that happen. So this is like steampunk in the sky fantasy, basically. Everybody lives on these giant islands. Everybody can fly through magic. And there are a lot of genealogically based magics in this world as well. Like blood shadows, where you can make your shadow kill people. Which is terrifying. And yes, it's exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Then there's like mirror walkers, people who can walk through mirrors. There's people that can morph into different animals that they've killed. Like, that's a whole cultural thing that's weird. Then there's these bone feather people that are basically invulnerable. And then something electric, and like an electric, you can make electric arms or something. I don't know. It's some weird French word. There's a lot of French. Not French, but there's like a lot of French words randomly. One of the nations is Spanish, and one of the others is French. And then there's probably an English one in there too. There's a bunch of empires. Anyways, that took a while to get to the point of, I liked the politicking in this series. Additionally, the very last one, the Uncharted Sky, as you could probably tell by the title, there's a bit of an Indiana Jones vibe going, which I also really liked. That was enjoyable to me. I think I really liked the last one the best out of all of them. And that's probably unpopular amongst the people that I've talked to. But like the Indiana Jones vibe type of thing is also something that uniquely gets to me, because that sense of wonder about the world is something that is near and dear to my heart. We'll just say that. Yeah. There's also some really good relationships in this one, as we have Jean-Claude and his ward. It's really bad because I forgot her name, and I'm terrible with names. It's not Emily. That's not right. Yeah, so we have this big, older gentleman called Jean-Claude, who is a musketeer, who is the guardian, Isabel. That's her name, of Isabel. And they have such a great friendship, and they are so confident in each other, and there's just so many great things about their relationships and how they navigate relationships with other people, in relation, to each other as well. But their friendship, their kind of like mother. Why did I say mother? They're kind of like father-daughter, roughly, relationship was really heartwarming. Yeah, definitely read this for the politicking, because the politicking is really, really well done. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. Next up, we have my Spiffbo books, which there were a lot of them. I read 6 books for Spiffbo, and then I reviewed at least 2 others, I think, that are also Spiffbo entries. I did this in another video. It's going to be linked up above that thing. Go watch that one. Now for another long one. Let's talk Robin Hobb. So in this wonderful year of 2023, I finally finished The Realm of the Elderlings, which is a just wild achievement because I have been reading this book series for 2 years going on. This has been such a journey, and I am very blessed to have shared it with wonderful people like Evie and Derry and Anitha, and there's a bunch of other people that kind of like popped in and out of the live shows, but those were the main four. And so thank you for everybody that participated in this read-along, that came along with us, that talked, that contributed to your thoughts, because this was such a wonderful experience in getting to know everybody more better, in hearing everybody's thoughts, different thoughts and perspective on this series, because it was just amazing. And y'all are amazing. What is my final verdict on it? Well, yes, it's an amazing series. Is it one of my favorite of all time? Yes, absolutely. I think I can firmly put it there. Favorite, Fool's Fate. Absolutely. 100%. I say that because to me, Hobb can be really good at plotting as well as characters, right? Really good with characters. And I think the convergence of Hobb's great plots and great character work and great pacing and all this other jazz combines best in Fool's Fate, right? And it's just this epic climax of 9 whole books of Easter eggs and prophecies and all this other jazz just coming together in this one book and concluding. And then she wrote 7 other books, right? These other 7, they were good books, but they never quite reached the highs that I got from Fool's Fate. And there's a lot of conflicting reasons for that. I know a lot of people that I know really love Assassin's Fate as their favorite. Which is the final one and fits in the full trilogy. And I have reasons that it's not. In fact, I think that in terms of Rain Wilds and fits in the Fool, I think there's some significant, there's pacing issues, there are structural issues, and then the last book, there was a big part of like the last series that really kind of disappointed me and kind of hurt me on an emotional level, but like not in the good type of hurt where like it makes me sad, but it's cathartic in its own sort of way, but just like it's disappointing in a way that makes me sad. And I'm going to refer to characters as Buckkeep characters and Liveship characters. That is the extent of what I'm saying. So Fits in the Fool, obviously, is told from the point of view of some Buckkeep, like a Buckkeep character specifically. Well, Liveship characters appear. Cool. And things happen to these Liveship characters. Very emotional things, very life-changing things, just momentous things happen to these Liveship characters as a result of these Buckkeep characters coming into their lives, as a result of these Buckkeep characters and the story that is being told about these Buckkeep characters. And because of the perspective was from the Buckkeep characters, and because of the things that were happening between the Buckkeep characters and Liveship characters, there was an emotional distance in the narrative from the Liveship characters. So that when these big things were happening to these Liveship characters, these characters that I had gone through a lot with in Rain Wilds and Liveships, I felt that emotional distance. And the more I think about it, the more that kind of saddens me, because with the Buckkeep characters, we get all these highs and lows and we're there for them. They're right there with them perspective-wise. And we feel the pain that they're going through because we're right there with them. And this is their head. This is where we're at, right there. But we don't get perspectives from these Liveship characters. We don't get to see what they're thinking. We see what a stranger is thinking about these Liveship characters, what they're going through. We see somebody not understanding what they're going through. And we see a lack of empathy from these Buckkeep characters at times as well. When all I want to do is be in the room with those Liveship characters, feeling what they're feeling and knowing where they're at. and I couldn't because of the distance in the narrative. I felt like I was a stranger looking upon my best friend's life, basically. And that was really sad for me in its own way, because I wanted to be there for them, but I felt like I couldn't. Anyways, that was a lot of words. So that's why Assassin's Fate and the rest of the Fitz and Fool trilogy aren't my favorite trilogy. There were some really good stuff, some really beloved characters introduced, reacquainted with. There were some really great moments, but Hob genuinely hurt me this time, and it makes it, yeah. So that's where I'm at with that. Hopefully that I do think that live ships and Rain Wilds will probably be better on reread, and I really liked Rain Wilds. It was one of those ones like it's not as bad as everybody says it is. I think it still has structural issues because of what the publisher forced Hob to do, but it's really not as bad as people say it is. Next up, let's talk about some KJ Parker. This is the first KJ Parker. It will not be the last KJ Parker. You can be for sure. This is The Hammer, which is one of his standalones. And KJ Parker always just like really unique and interesting with his writing style. When I'm not reading KJ Parker and I come to a KJ Parker, it's always just so refreshing in its own way. Even though everybody in these books is terrible, because that's just how KJ Parker writes. Everybody's just terrible and manipulable, and sometimes there's somebody who's manipulating them. This kind of feels like a fantasy equivalent retelling or something of the fight for Australian independence. And even that makes it sound way more dramatic than it is. Really, it's about this dude who, his family is aristocratic, but they live in the middle of nowhere on a continent that they didn't come from, right? They're in exile, this whole entire aristocratic family. And they isolate themselves from the town down below. They go off and they raid the town down below every once in a while, but they, mainly keep their hoity-toity noises themselves, even though they're basically almost on the same level as said people down below, because they live on like an elevated step or something like that. This is the tale of like a third son, I think it is. He's like the useless son. His kind of quest for meaning, you could say. It's hard to describe. I'm not selling it very well. It kind of shows how a lot of different people are douchey and manipulative. Showcases some screwed up family dynamics and some screwed up town dynamics. Also, dependency. That's a big theme. Dependency on your family, dependency on your motherland. That was my left hand. Good. Yeah. It was KJ Parker. It was really interesting. It did not top The Company for me, but it was still really good. Next up, let's talk about The Blade of Dream by Daniel Abraham. And first of all, the reason everybody wants to say Blade of Dreams is very simple. Robert Jordan has a book called The Knife of Dreams. Wow. So all of us are kind of preset to say dreams for that. So it's one dream singular, Blade of Dream, which does exist as a physical object in this book. Second book in the Kithamar trilogy, Daniel Abraham. Did I mention that? Who likes Daniel Abraham? Hey, that's me. Did I like this book, first of all? Yes, I did. It's Daniel Abraham. This is about the city of Kithamar, and it takes place over the same time period that Age of Ash did. So, first question about this. Can this be read before Age of Ash? Nobody was asking that question. Well, maybe some people were. Yes, it can be. It absolutely, honestly, I would recommend this as a start rather than Age of Ash. I say that mostly because I connected with the characters a little bit more in this one, because they were a little bit more sympathetic than the chick from the first one who was just dealing with grief in a really angry way. I fully expect to sympathize with her a little bit more on the second reread, though. Or technically the first reread, because I've only read the book once. The second read, the first reread. Anyways, so we technically have two main characters here. First of all, we have a dude from the city guard, whose name I can't remember. We get more perspectives from the city guard randomly, which is cool. And that showcases a side of the city that is really different from, I believe, was it Elise? No, probably wasn't. It was an A. From the girl from An Age of Ash, because she was a criminal. It also shows more about the workings of the city, because the other main character was Elise, I believe. Nope, wrong. Ilana. I could be wrong about either of those names. I don't remember what her name was either. But she is the daughter of Burn Asal, which sounds really funny out loud. His name is Burn, as in the word born, and then A space Sal, if I remember correctly, because that's kind of a really funny name, because it's literally Burn Asal. There's a reason I remember that name. The princess, we'll call her that, even though she's not a princess. And, well, she might be. I don't remember. Gosh, terms and names are hard for me to remember. That's why Burn Asal is something that I remember, because you hear it, don't you? So the princess and the city guard fall in love. Yay! This is their story. So there are some things that are revealed in Age of Ash that I don't know if it lessened the mystery, but I'm pretty sure that the mystery would be a lot more heightened if I didn't know what was going on from Age of Ash, which would be super interesting. So yeah, I cannot wait for the next one to come out. We don't even have a date for the next one, which is annoying. But also, Abraham, you got this. We love you, buddy. Please write things faster. That would be great. But also, you don't owe us anything, because screw everybody. But please don't turn into Patrick Rothfuss or George R.R. Martin. I know you were his prodigy, but we like it when you write. Though, to be fair, he was probably busy writing Mercy of the Gods, which is the next James S.A. Corey book that's coming out. That's not in The Expanse, but sounds really interesting. Okay, so let's talk Sanderson. So I talked about Tress at some point during the year. I did not read whatever the Wizard's Guide to Medieval England or whatever. I haven't read that one yet. Mostly because I was less interested because it wasn't Cosmere, and I really like the Cosmere guys. So I have read Yumi. I almost combined those titles. I read Yumi and I read Sunlet Man. I can say those titles, or Secret Projects 3 and 4. Yumi was a suitable entry for this Cosmere standalone, and then Sunlet Man is very Cosmere aware. Both of which I really liked. Yumi was beautiful art, first of all. That has to be said. And I loved the Korean inspirations for Yumi, and I just loved the dichotomy between the two worlds that are in this book. We'll go with that word. This is another love story where two people are connected and they come from two different worlds. And they have to figure it out. Like, one's solid while the other's kind of like a ghost or whatever. Or the other's... Yeah, they switch between two worlds. And there's definitely some Cosmere references in this book. Because, of course, Wit is there. And Wit is actually narrating this book. / Hoyd. Minor spoilers there. For a book where Hoyd goes by a different name. I'm definitely... I'm a fan of Wit, or Hoyd's wit, whatever you want to say. Hoyd's humor. I like books that are narrated by him. Trust, and this one really worked for me. I don't know what else to say. Interesting magic system for sure. Interesting magic that he introduced. I can't really say anything else because spoilers. And then next, we have the Sunlet Man, which was really fun. So the Sunlet Man follows a character from Stormlight. The Sunlet Man is also set many moons, hundreds of moons possibly, many moons into the future. It takes place during the space age of the Cosmere. And yes, this person from Stormlight Archive, who is not in the space age of the Cosmere, is still alive because magic. He is on the run from the infamous Night Brigade, who is introduced in this book, sort of. Their name is basically mentioned, of course. But he's on the run from the Night Brigade, and he lands on this planet. And he has to figure out how the magic system works so he can recharge his magical doohickey. And doohickey is a very generous term because it's not a doohickey at all. So that he can get away again. So he is discovering this society, discovering this magic system and how it works, because it is very brutal. Because in order for magic things to happen, you have to burn people alive in the light of the sun as it rises, because people are always on the move in this one because the sun burns everything alive, so you have to keep moving, and the plants are crazy. It was kind of weird to see pictures of green flowing fields, knowing that those green flowing fields could only grow in the night. So that was kind of weird about how plants worked on that planet, but it's fine. But I guess it works. I guess if you have a giant ring around or something that reflects starlight, then reflects sunlight, then I guess there's chlorophyll. The world building of how the plants and animals worked was kind of weird for me. But I did like the society. I liked the Cosmere references, of course, because the implications were great. Last thing you probably want to know is, are there any required readings before this? I would say being caught up with Stormlight is a definite must. Actually, you could comfortably read this book after having read only Dawnshard up through Dawnshard. So if you had read Oathbringer, through the first 3 Stormlight Archive books, Oathbringer, and then Dawnshard, I think you could read this book comfortably and be fine. If you had read no other Cosmere books, you'd be fine. Because, Rhythm of War definitely works because there's some more characterization for this character in that book. But of course, it's entirely possible that you could go this entire book without knowing who this character was and be fine. I think the big complaint that I've seen a lot of people have is that they feel like there's books they haven't read. And let me tell you this. I'll say this. If this were any other author except Sanderson, this would not be said. Straight up. It's only because people are just I know there's more stories to this, and I know how much Sanderson has planned to write, that they're saying this. At least that's what I think. Our character, his name is Nomad in this book, is the epitome of the mysterious stranger, except we kind of see everything from his point of view in Western stories. And I think in other Western stories, it's entirely reasonable to not know anything about the mysterious stranger and go through the book and learn about the mysterious stranger, which is exactly what this does. There is a lot about Nomad's backstory that we don't know because there's such a huge gap between Stormlight and the Stormlight we have and Nomad's story in the Sunlet Man. I think that Sanderson does a very good job of telling the reader what they know in order to sympathize with Nomad and his story, right? It's a little bit teasing. It's a little bit kind of as the book, you get more and more pulled out of Nomad bit by bit by bit as the book goes along. But what he did was reasonable as books go. Even from a perspective character, it was reasonable. And I implore you, if you're reading The Sunlet Man, to trust the process. You'll be told everything you need to know. If you are one of those people that just feels like you're missing everything in the Cosmere, don't. I feel like that's insensitive. I think this is a topic that I need to learn to speak better on, because this is going to continue to be a problem, because I feel like people did this with Lost Metal as well, where they're like, I'm missing something because they're not caught up on the Cosmere, when it's just no. Yeah, that was a brand new magic system he introduced. It's not in any other book. Chill out. Basically, trust the process. You can enjoy the book without knowing everything. And I think Sanderson still, with every book he has written, has done a good job, even with Lost Metal, of making sure you can read it without reading every single thing that he's written. I will go into other recommended reading for Sunlet Man, so if you want some additional reading to understand basically each and every reference. There was some terminology from Warbreaker, from the magic system of Warbreaker. There was terminology from Elantris. Both of these, it's 1 or 2 paragraphs that involve this terminology. That, again, it's understandable if you don't know anything, I think. That, here's a big pot of magic or whatever. But that happens from Elantris. There's some stuff from references to Mistborn as well. And then the big thing that if you want to read one thing beyond Oathbringer, I would read Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, because that culture from Shadows of Science in the Forest of Hell is represented in this book. And while they do explain enough for you to understand what's going on with the culture, again, Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell is an additional backstory, basically. Not for the characters, but just the culture. They come from the same culture. That's it. I'm trying to think if there's other places that are mentioned other than the Roshar references to Stormlight. There isn't really anything. Because there's no references to White Sand, because Sanderson never references White Sand outside of saying Chris exists, which I think that's how you pronounce her name. That was Sanderson. And now we have some rereads. I did two rereads this year. The first was Long Price Quartet. I might be tempted to read it this coming up year as well. Coming up meaning 2024. We'll find out. I was reading it with Tori from Tori Talks, who was reading it for the first time. If you haven't read Long Price Quartet, what are you doing? You should really go read it. I have a recommendation video that's, well, I don't remember how many years old. It's there, right there, up there, wherever the corner is in that direction. Long Price Quartet. First of all, was it better on a reread? Absolutely it was. One of the things that improved was the first book. I think that the first book had a lot more weight to it because knowing how the first book affects the rest of the books really just makes you just like, you're making that decision. Okay. And terrifying. Seedless, again, the Undot, just this entire book, all the characters. Love all of them in all 4 books. I mean, I don't love everybody equally, or love everybody indeed. I'm definitely a Autumn War, Shadow in Summer, Price of Spring, Betrayal in Winter is my ranking. This is just an amazing series about 2 men and the choices that they make throughout their lives and how those choices affect the world. There's so many good themes in this book, themes of choices, themes of failure, and how those failures affect those people around you. And yeah. I really love this series. This is one of my top series of all time, and you should definitely go read it if you haven't. And if you have read it, go read it again because it's worth it. Well, that next one is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So I read this one, and then I read Mark of Athena as well, and got about halfway through House of Hades. This was a spur-of-the-moment read. Percy Jackson's show started coming out mid-December. Actually, the Percy Jackson show started coming out on my birthday, which was a present, let me tell you. So I just felt the sudden hankering to reread the Percy Jackson books. And I could read one of those in like 2 hours. Like they're really fast reads. Faster than I remember. But I was still down for the ride. Right? Because I remember a few years ago I reread Percy Jackson. And I was like, this is not what I remember. Because I had some nostalgia glasses and some stuff. And this time I was just like, you know what? I'm going to read it. It is what it is. Getting into that mindset. And I really enjoyed it, both for the nostalgia factor and for the writing for what it was. It definitely was middle grade writing where it bounced all over the place. Things happened very fast. A lot of things happened very fast. And the scenes progressed so much quicker than I remember. But like, it is what it is. I was a different reader when I was in, 12. It happens. We grow up. We move. Our brains operate differently. We read faster. That's me. So, do I still love it like this? Yes, of course I still love it. A lot of people were introduced into fantasy with Harry Potter, and I technically was introduced with stuff like The Hobbit and Aragon. I think I read this first, though. I think I was really introduced to what fiction could do, in my opinion, with Percy Jackson. This is the real, book that I felt like firmly sparked my love of stories. So this is essentially my equivalent to Harry Potter. If I've said that already, I don't know. It's like coming home. It is like coming home reading this again and being like, look at these characters that I know and love, and I've seen them go through all this. And then I read Mark of Athena because I didn't want to read Son of Neptune or Lost Hero again, because I read Son of Neptune and Lost Hero so many times while I was waiting for Mark of Athena and then House of Hades to come out. Mark of Athena and House of Hades are kind of tied for my favorite of the second 5-book series. Of the first series, Last Olympian is definitely my favorite. Right, what Last Olympian did for me was just like with wrapping up the series and the Battle of New York. Oh, I really want to see that on the big screen. Like, guys, if you haven't already, go watch the Percy Jackson series. Right, if only so it can get more viewership and hopefully more good ratings, so that we can eventually make it to season 5. Like, you have no idea how much I want to see the Battle of New York on a big screen. Like, oh. It's going to be great if we can get there. Now that I have my notes back, let's get back on track. Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu. So this is the Ken Liu that I read this year. This is also the only book of short stories you will see on this list, because I really didn't finish all the other ones. All the other books of short stories that I started, which was at least 3. Academic Exercises, Carbide Tip Pens, and Iki Papalu, which I read at least 1 from all of those. So, this was a really interesting book of short stories. It's in contrast with Paper Menagerie. Paper Menagerie is more, to me, it felt more emotional, gut punchy, and makes you see this world differently, even though there was some sci-fi stuff in there. Whereas I feel like the short stories in Hidden Girl, where some of them were gut punchy, but being mostly sci-fi, these books, these short stories really hammered home some very specific things, because some of them were interconnected, and really helped think about the future more, right? This was very, very, very future focused, whereas not of all the Paper Menagerie ones were, and that kind of diluted the future focus a little bit with how that book was, with how Paper Menagerie was. I do like Paper Menagerie better, but I still think Hidden Girl is really good. You have especially a lot of stories about consciousness. A lot of the interconnected ones were how humanity would learn to upload consciousness to the cloud and reduce their footprint on the earth down to basically people were just, machines. Not really machines, but they were consciousness residing in this metaverse, kind of, divorced from their bodies. That was a thing that popped up in like 4 or 5 of the stories, and those were connected. And that was really interesting to think about whether or not we could do that and what that would look like, and how human consciousness would perceive that even. Next up, we have Jade City, Jade War, and Jade Legacy. So this was one that kind of popped up randomly. I didn't plan on this at the beginning of the year, but then Tori, over at Tori Talks, was like, hey guys, y'all want to read this trilogy? And I'm like, I've been waiting to read this trilogy with people, so let's do it. And I had such a fun time. So I think the first question would be, does this live up to the hype? Because like, if you look on some top 10 lists in our community, like if you look at r/fantasy or something like that, Fond du Lis, Jade City, it pops up. It's there. People love it. Do I love it? I do love it. Is it like top 10? I don't know. I'd have to put together a top 10 list, which means I'd have to put together like 20 or 30 series and see if I can narrow it down a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely up there. It's a really, really good series. Favorite character was Shay. Not just because she was the accountant, basically. Well, a little bit because of that. I really liked Shay's storyline, partially because of the challenge that it presented in challenging how I think about some things. To a certain extent, she's one of those characters that did some things that I didn't agree with. And it's interesting to think about that and to think about why she did those things and how those shaped her as a person. Some of those things were very sad. And I think all of these characters have so many things that happened to them or they did that affected them and changed them. And I think that's one of the wonders of this series, where you can see how these characters change over their life from the very beginning, not necessarily of their lives, but the time that from one changing of the guard to the next. And the first book took place in a few months, right? And that was very driving, right? The first book had a very deliberate thrust to it, right? It was all about, is this gang war going to happen? Jade War was a different type of war. It was a little bit more extended out than Jade City and had a lot less thrust to it. There wasn't like a clear question that the book was asking like Jade City was. There are some kind of more time skips, and they feel a bit awkwardly like random, if that makes any sense. But it doesn't necessarily have this, like looking back, Jade Ward does have some similar questions and very specific ones that Jade War asks, but they're not at the forefront like they were in Jade City. They're kind of in the back until they kind of bite you. And then I read Jade Legacy. And I am going to be basic in the sense that I really like Jade Legacy the most, City the second, and War the most. Or War the least, sorry. But they were all really good, and the character work was really good. Jade Legacy asked its own questions that were answered by the end of the book. That's really, like, it's even in the name. Like, what is the legacy of these characters going to be going forward? I really love this series. I would love to reread it at some point. Just to read it, to be in this world and this family pressure, like, to see these family dynamics again because of how these characters changed over the course of these many years. There's a lot of politicking between the gangs, between nations. There are nations that are trying to encroach upon Janloon, and there's some foreign policy happening along with the gang politicking, which was really interesting. This was really good. Definitely give this a read if you haven't. I'm sure there's more I could talk about, but I'm going to try to speed this up because I've been talking for at least a couple batches of 40 minutes by now, and I'm going to try to cut it down. Bloodstones and Phased by Tori. I believe I mentioned Phased in my Spiffbo video, but at that point I hadn't read it, so let's talk about it here. So Tori Talks, has 2 books that she has read, or that I have read, that she has written. The first is Phased, which is a werewolf urban fantasy, and I really liked it. I think Tori's strength is really thoughtful relationships and not hinging on tropes in terms of a lot of those relationships, right? So you have male-female friendships, female-female friendships that aren't rivaling for some guy, stuff like that. You have a sisterly relationship that was really nice in this book because these 2 werewolf sisters are they are full-bred feral werewolves ? They grew up in their own whatever, and they're trying to be this shady government program is trying to assimilate them into normal life where all these people are only like half-breed werewolves in this school. And it's really interesting. She's writing another book about it because it kind of ended on this like, hey, look what's going to happen in the future moment. I really like this. It's the tale of 2 girls finding friends and family, or building a family. It's a found family book, which is really heartwarming. Really short, but very heartwarming. I'm looking forward to reading more when she writes it. I believe she wants it to be a duology. The second one is Bloodstones. So I did receive an e-arc of this in exchange for an honest review, of course. And I liked it. I really like Bloodstones. Again, I think Tori's strength is her character dynamics, and working on building those friendships. We have another sisterly relationship. We have a brother looking for his lost brother. You have brother building brotherhood. You have kings and queens and politicking that is starting to happen. This book, where there were some emotional moments, there were some definitive character arcs that happened, but a lot of, especially with the ending of this book felt like the setup for the rest of the series. So it didn't necessarily feel as self-contained as a lot of fantasy tends to be, especially on the first book, which is fine, right? It's a beautiful world, a very interesting world that leaves you wanting the next book very soon, which she is starting to write now, and I am looking forward to it. Next up, The Mandalorian Armor by, I don't know, K.W. Jeter. I don't know who this guy is. So, this is a Legends Star Wars book, the first of a trilogy that I did not finish this year. I only read this one. This is all 3 of them in a bind-up for Barnes & Noble. Very pretty. Really appreciate Barnes & Noble putting out these bind-ups of Star Wars books. I hope they do more, because they're nice. The original Book of Boba Fett. Before that happened, before Disney kind of took over and destroyed that storyline. In it, Mandalorian, a.k.a. not the Mandalorian, gosh. In it, Boba Fett teams up with Dengar after the explosion. There's a lot of, hey, he survived the Sarlacc. And then there's a bunch of flashbacks as well to his conflict with Bosk and some of his relationship with the Empire and the Bounty Hunter Guild, and just some really interesting stuff going on there. I do want to read the next one, but a lot of times I just don't end up picking it up because there's a lot of other books I wanted to read more. I do need to really dive into a lot more Star Wars, though. I should. And hopefully this coming up year I will. Even with the writing that felt dated, it definitely felt like a better story than Book of Boba Fett, which to me was absolute garbage. All right, next up is A Radical Act of Free Magic by, what's her name? H.G. Perry. Just Perry. H.G. Perry. This is the second book of the Shadow Histories. I believe I already talked about Declaration of the Rights of Magicians, but I will kind of talk about both a little bit. So first up, we have, the second one takes place after the French Revolution. A big part of the conflict in the book is fueled by Napoleon, right? Napoleon's rise to power and a shadowy figure that is behind Napoleon's rise to power and was also behind some stuff with the French Revolution. So we have William Pitt, who is a vampire, and that is confirmed in the first book, and that is something that is talked about early on in the first book, against this other shadowy force. Wilberforce is there. He is a non-magic person, and he is fighting for the abolition of slavery as well as the abolition of the wristbands that don't allow commoners to wear magic. And this is William Pitt's sort of stuff as well. The strength of this series is their bromance, right? The bromance between the abolitionist and the prime minister, in this magical other thing. And then, of course, we also have Napoleon as a viewpoint character, and then Fina, who is a slave girl from Jamaica, who is participating in the Haitian Revolution as well in this book. And Fina takes a really big part because she is a foil. She is kind of a spy, a foil against, I don't know if foil is the right word, but she has a lot of very unique powers that she is using against the shadowy figure. Seeing everything come together was really, really interesting. Politicking, not a lot of action, definitely a character-based book. A lot of musings about trust in this one. And I really enjoyed seeing this as like a different take on history, a different take on history if there was magic. I wouldn't say this series is for you if you really like the history. Like if you're really, really familiar with history, it really paints with very broad strokes. And even just doing a quick Wikipedia search, I can already tell there are some things that are slightly different. But of course, this is an alternative history. And then there are some things that are simplified for the reader's sake, right? This is not a dry history book. This is not Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is much more modern prose and modern storytelling. I really love this series, and I hope other people, would read this as well. More people would read this because it's just really good, and I need to talk about this series more. Engineer Trilogy. KJ Parker. How do I sum up this one? Love is a flaw. Duty is a flaw. Everyone is terrible. That's this book. That's this series. We've actually had 3 live shows. I'm going to put those links down below. I don't think I can pop them all up right there, but down below probably. Live shows for all 3 books of the series, which are Devices and Desires, which sounds weird. Evil for Evil, which I felt weird about. Again, kind of a weird title. And The Escapement, which is a word that nobody knows. So, KJ Parker for you guys. Weirdly, this series got shorter as it went along, which is like a blessed thing, because The Escapement, after going through these thick books that Evil for Evil is, The Escapement is tiny. It's great. What did I think about this series? Overall, really good. We got some really gripping scenes of forging specific iron implements. We got advancement in technology. We got musings about, oh my gosh, the use of the specifications, which is supposed to be perfection, but we got a really good revelatory moment in The Escapement that was really nice. The most redeemable person was this nerdy dude that was a clerk at the beginning of the series. He's the most relatable guy ever, or at least out of anybody else in the series, because everybody else is terrible. Everybody except this one clerk is terrible. Is it my favorite? I think The Company still takes the cake. This is still up there. I think I need to read some of his more trilogies and really think on that a little bit more as I read some of his other works. I am reading Savis Korak's, that trilogy, starting this month. So reading a KJ Parker series is definitely different. Next up, as we trundle, no, that's too slow, rocket down this path of the rest of the books, we have the Hexologists. This is by Josiah Bancroft. And really, really love this. This was a mood read of like, I know this is a book I really want to read that's sitting on my shelf. Let's read it. So this is about a married couple, right? Happily married, that is a detective couple that keep the famed art of hexology alive in a world with a bunch of other magics that are easier to use. This was really just a fun ride, and I hope he turns this into like a Dresden type series that's very much Murder of the Week or whatever, where they go out and use their detective things. The increase in scale based on the end of the book, I'm like, I hope he doesn't like make this just a trilogy. I hope he writes a lot in this series, because I know he wants to write more. Josiah Bancroft's prose there's definitely some $10 words in there, and he uses them very well, in my opinion. But it's also very beautiful, the way that he writes. His prose is entertaining, at the very least. And then next up, we have A Brightness Long Ago by the ineffable, I don't know what in word I want to use for him, but the great, the shining bright GGK Guy Gavriel K. This was my first GGK. I talked to Jake Bishop, and I was like, what's the least normie place to start? And he's like, you should start out with Brightness Long Ago. And then Evie, Jake, and this was a few months ago. And then Evie, Jake, and Kyle in December were like, we're reading A Brightness Long Ago. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to read it with you. And it worked. They let me in. Ha ha ha. Joke's on them. I don't know what joke though. And I really liked it. This was really good. It was a love story. Dude sees this chick murdering somebody and he's like, yeah, that one. Kind of weird. Helps her out at a random, hey, and the rest is history. No, not really, but kind of sorting out. This story is very much about the ripple effect of actions. It takes a few different POVs, not just the guy's POV and his, all that jazz, but also the POVs of people around this couple and how their actions have affected those people, which was really, really interesting because you see a lot of different little bits and pieces of the perspectives because they're not like, they're just random people around them that are affected, whether it's some random healer or somebody who just, gambles that is next to them. That's I'm not going to say any more on that. Really gripping writing, especially like the horse race that is in this one. That was the best horse race I've read. I don't think I've read many other horse races, so it's not saying that much, but like as soon as the race began, I did not put the book down because I physically couldn't. I was just lasered in there. Really good writing. GGK good, guys. Like, I don't know if you knew this, but GGK good. Like, that's all I can say. I am reading more GGK. I'm reading Sailing to Sarantium with Evie et al. This month, and I believe we're going to do the next book, which is Lord of Embers next, which will be fun. I'm excited. Next up, we have Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is one that everybody had on their bingo card that I would read this week. Month, year, that's the correct time period. Yeah, nobody did. I didn't know until I ordered it. I had a kick for time loops for a hot second, which caused me to read this. This was a good book. It's time travel, and I thought it was very gripping. It was very, the pace, the stepping stone of tension was done really well. The consequences, eventual solution, kind of like the build up behind all these relationships that were built around this were very interesting. So I like this. This was fun. Will I read more Blake Crouch? Maybe. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Because it was just kind of so out of pocket for me to read it anyways. It's entirely possible that if I got on some sci-fi kicks that I will. Next up, we have Terry Pratchett. Another fun time. When did I read Going? I swear I read Going Postal this year too. On further reflection, I realized that I read Making Money and Going Postal at the end of 2022, and it feels like not that long has gone by. Men at Arms was the only Terry Pratchett I read this year, which is kind of sad, but it was still a good one. A little bit more social commentary than Guards. A lot of fun Assassin's Guild hijinks, and more people in the Night's Watch, Vimes, and the Patrician doing things. I definitely enjoy the Patrician as a character, how he manipulates people without them knowing, kind of thing. That's an interesting, like, him as a leader is a very interesting case study. Vimes as a leader is also a very interesting case study, and I'm gonna do my job and I'm gonna do it however well I want to, and specifically very well, even when people tell me not to. I don't know how to phrase it. We'll see. As time goes on, I'll probably define that a little bit more. So yeah, this was fun, hilarious, entertaining. It's Terry Pratchett. Good. Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. The man, the myth, the beetle. Adrian. I don't know if he would describe himself as a beetle. I need to ask him that question. Remind me to ask him what type of bug he is. Depression. That's this book. This book is really interesting because you have two different POVs. One from a fantasy POV and one from a sci-fi POV. This book really plays with the concept of sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable. Gosh, I got the book name mixed up. Sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Really plays with that because you have this very basic, if I were to call her a barbarian, would not be as, this is somebody who is low technology, does not have that much technology, believes in magic. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go see this great sorcerer. And he's basically this Star Trek dude that's observing these people and kind of interfering with his big technology. And she sees a dragon, he sees a drone, stuff like that. And there's this technology that he uses to dissociate, to isolate himself from those emotions. And that's what hit me hard in this novella, was him and how he deals with his emotions and how he puts them away for a later time sometimes. That kind of hit. So, yeah, that was fun. Read this book. It's great. It's a novella, by the way. And then we have another Adrian Tchaikovsky with The House of Open Wounds. Another banger because Mr. Bugman is a chameleon of a writer. This is a sequel to City of Last Chances, which I did make a review about. Plug! These are probably my favorite, some of my favorite, City of Last Chances is probably my favorite Tchaikovsky books right now. It's really weird, I will say that, because there's a lot of POVs, and the city is the main character. It's about the city. That's City of Last Chances. House of Open Wounds, it's not about a city. It's about a tent in an army. And there's some chapter titles that are called Hell, which means battles. This is a hospital tent. Specifically, in City of Last Chances, we encountered the occupiers of the city were called the Palicine, or the Pals, because they're all pals with everybody. No, not really. They want to perfect the world. Classic. And they have this hospital unit that is experimental within their army, right? And that's completely made up of foreigners to the Pals. Well, mostly. They're ruled by the Temporary Commission of Ends and Means, but it's not temporary because they've been ruling for a couple hundred years. And they're trying to conquer the entire world by perfecting it. But there's these things that are necessary evils, which has come up in other books, which is really interesting. Other non-Tchaikovsky books about how there are necessary evils, but different concepts anyways. Temporary evils, essentially. Yeah, so we follow Yasnik. Yasnik is from City of Last Chances. He is a god's priest. Specifically, this god that he follows, Ish, is a healing god. And when he heals you, you cannot do any more harm, or else your wounds will come back to you. You can imagine doing anything like that in the army is chaotic. I would say that House of Open Wounds is, one, you do not have to read City of Last Chances to read House of Open Wounds, right? So if you didn't like City of Last Chances, House of Open Open Wounds might be a little bit more concentrated for you because the character studies are a little bit deeper and it's about the horrors of war. And that might appeal to you. Horrors of war and some other stuff. Everything you need to know about Yasnik is gradually told you over time, so you're good. Just like with the Sunlet Man, you don't really just trust the process and you'll be fine. I really liked House of Open Wounds. I am getting another special edition for that from, I almost said Golden Globe, Goldsboro. The Goldsboro special edition with the nice little, that's coming in the mail. I'm happy. Funny, also, strangely, something that I agree with that Tchaikovsky says about his writing is that the darker it is, the funnier it is. I agree, and I love it. It's great. Please write more dark things, Tchaikovsky, so you can be funnier and make me laugh because of darkness. The final thing that we're going to talk about tonight. Wow, I realized that I didn't put that book back after I was reading it. You can tell that I did this over multiple hours. Imperium by Robert Harris. This book is about a little-known man named Cicero. Little known, but largely known. I was planning on starting it this year. But again, back a few months of the year, I had some space. I decided to mood read a few more things. Imperium, that's Lustrum. That's the second one that I'm in the middle of reading, almost done with. Imperium was great. This was about Cicero's rise to power, rise to consulship, and this series so far is amazing. I don't know that much about Roman history. I have some approximate knowledge about, hey, Julius Caesar, Augustus, some other dudes. I don't really know that much about what happened before. Roman gods, I know a little bit about that because I know about the Greek gods, and same difference, sort of. But look, this is politics. This is just Roman politics. That's all these books are. And it's so fascinating. It's so cool. I love reading about Roman politics. I love reading about politics in general and people backstabbing and people switching sides and people trying to make people being like, for the nation, for Rome. It's great. It's a fun, dandy time. And the speeches. That man, he actually uses some of Cicero's speeches, excerpts from Cicero's speeches. And they're fantastic. I'm thinking about going just to read some of the speeches because they're really good. So that's Imperium. I'll probably talk about Lustrum and Dictator next month. If I do an actual monthly or I do quarterly. I'm not sure yet. But you'll be definitely seeing more videos from me. So that's that. Thank you for watching. You guys are wonderful. I'm going to wrap this up quick. And I'll see you next time because there will be a next time. Have a good night and get some rest because that's important.